All right, great. So today we have the pleasure to have Mr. Jack Rusk from C.Scale to join us for this inspiring conversation on his journey as the co-founder of C.Scale and also his advice for our students. So, but to get started, I guess, Jack, let me ask you a question about your experience at Yale as an EM student. And how do you feel it actually prepare you for the career in sustainability in general? We can start with that, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Kingshu.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did the Yale Masters of Environmental Management actually as a joint degree with the Yale School of Architecture, which is a unique program, I think, in North America. And what really it allows student to do is meet two disciplines, kind of contrasting disciplines, each on their own terms. The School of Architecture is very much like building science and building design focused curriculum, where the Master's of Environmental Management is focused on the environmental sciences broadly, where I focus on industrial ecology, like your students, life cycle assessment, environmentally extended input output. And rather than a curriculum that is focused just in one place or the other, you might be taking classes outside, right? Your sort of main focus, but you're really trying to shoehorn them back into your main curriculum. You sort of are like in this like elliptical orbit with
Mhm.
two foci.
Oh,
So you
that's
have to
great.
sort of be able to understand, yeah, exactly. And it really means that you have to take the sort of constraints of each discipline seriously, even
Okay.
and especially because they're very different. So it was really lovely to be able to, I studied under Karen Sito actually for 4 years, worked in her lab. She studies urbanization at scale
Mhm.
and was able to do a lot of curriculum in industrial ecology, working with, you were one of my teaching assistants for an LCA course. I
Yes.
got the chance to take some classes with Edgar Hertwich, whose literature and writings I've always looked up to. So a really lovely experience there. And then I had this complementary experience on the design and building science side.
Yeah, that's great. Because I noticed when I was a TA teaching LC, I noticed that there's a very diverse background of your peers, right? So, but I was not aware until now that there is actually a focus on architecture part. Okay, so I guess that kind of is a good segue, and I guess that's one of the motivation that you co-founded C-Scale, right? Can you talk about this a little bit more?
Yeah, it's exactly that. And really speaks, I think, again, to the uniqueness of that education, has as a countervailing fact, because it's unique because most people don't have that. And most of the like practitioners working in the built environment actually don't have the chance to do an industrial ecology curriculum simultaneous with their design curriculum. And as we look at the sort of urgency of the situations ahead of us in the built environment, the goal really of C.Scale, the company we actually just spun out of an architecture firm, is to help those practitioners to simultaneously, do their day job of designing and delivering buildings that provide for health, safety, and welfare as well as they can, and rise to the challenge of decarbonizing the built environment without having to go out and get another degree, making these tools, data, and methods useful
Yeah.
within the core workflows that people are already working in.
So, I'm curious. So your users or your clients, or are those basically architects, or like has it having a degree in architecture, and then instead of asking them to take another like 18-month degree in industrial ecology, you provide them with necessary knowledge and skills they can deploy as they're actually going through different projects.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's
some
great.
of that you sort of like will make, evident and obvious in the use of the tools and data kind of product design. Other parts of it, you have to hide in the back end and put nice guardrails around so people are going to still be making realistic and science-aligned decisions
Okay.
without needing to know how to build an allocation methodology, right? Like there's things that just like we will often what are good examples of this? One example of this that comes first to mind is just like vetting appropriateness of background data for use in some of this analysis. For instance, when we think about concrete as a material, there's often a desire to use sort of the national average
Mm-hmm.
as the starting point for the environmental impacts from concrete. But the thing with concrete, especially in the US, is that it's a highly regionalized material.
Mm.
And the concrete that's available in Seattle, Washington, Vancouver, British Columbia, Toronto, New York, Miami, all have incredibly different environmental impact profiles
Hmm.
because the concrete's mixed using the electricity from the local grid. There's local cement supply chains and manufacturers. So that sort of like heavy data regionalization, we'll do that on the back end. And then all the user of the tool sees is the concrete that's available to their building that exists in one spot. The
Okay.
user doesn't need to think about data regionalization. They don't need to default to a national average number because we'll do that GIS work on the background to make sure that they're making reasonable local assumptions, as an example of the
Okay.
sort of things that
That's
will
very
hide.
interesting. Yeah, because that's actually related to the, important question in the LCA field is like, how do you pick a appropriate background data, right? So there are certain rules, certain criteria that's very domain specific. And in other cases, it's very kind of really classic LCA constraints, right? So you in this location, you should pick this one. So sounds like you implement a algorithm to do this automatically. So people probably still need to have this kind of mindset, but they don't have to like sift through the whole data set to find the information.
Exactly. And sort of to make it obvious, right? Rather than the user starts with nothing and they need to go and source concrete data, so they'll end up with national average. We say, here's what's available in this locality. And it gives them the sort of starting range to work from. From there, they go and source suppliers, etc.
That's very helpful, and I can imagine that's gonna like a streamline the whole workflow very much for the users. That also I think it reflects a very important point is that you need to have this kind of industry ecology knowledge when you design the tool or design your product so that you can offer this to your client, right? So I guess my next question is um, how can you give us a few examples of what you learned from the industry ecology and how do you implement into your product design or even like design not just a product but probably even design your company, right? So how do you position your company, your uniqueness, right, from an industry ecology perspective?
Yeah, I think that's right. And we're really seeing a profusion of both startups and actually some incumbent companies pivoting into this space. And I think that's really exciting to see the way that life cycle assessment tools and even people doing things like I think of actually Watershed, a large ESG kind of data provider and software platform, are
Mhm.
doing super cool stuff with input output that really has been an academic curiosity and they've reduced it to practice. And I think that's really like our goal as well is to make these things that often live in journals, and in one-off kind of like publications, accessible and generalizable to
Mhm.
serve a much wider cross section of the industry and practitioners trying to put this into practice every day. So what that looks like day to day for us is, I hate to say it because so much of my sort of like public facing presence is talking about big ideas, but really most of my day to day is me versus the coding interface. I'm just like in Python probably 6 to 8 hours a day, for better or for worse.
Oh, so you're pretty hardcore coders, I think. Yeah, and it kind
It
of
definitely snuck up on me. I did most of my graduate work in R and MATLAB,
mm,
and then found once yeah, you end up in practice that those are interesting and useful languages, but Python really is the thing that allows you to attach your data science workflows,
mm.
and model development all the way forward to deployment and implementation. So that was my big shift moving from school to practice was learning Python and forgetting those other languages.
Yeah, so well, yeah, so Python is really kind of popular and for the production especially, right? So that's good. And also I try to kind of infuse some of the Python practice in my industry college course as well. So glad to see that you feel like that's useful. And speaking of watershed, so I will try to find somebody to do a conversation as well, because I know some people over there as well. So I'm glad you actually mentioned that. Yeah, they're kind of really big and they're very innovative as well. So, but in both cases, both companies, C.Scale and Watershed, is really kind of based on the foundation of industry ecology. You have to have a really good understanding of the industry ecology methodologies, and you need to have enough domain knowledge and industry experience to know where to apply them, right? So that's a very good combination. Um, so I think one thing I want to ask you is also an opportunity for you to brag a little bit about is what is the one achievement or even just a progress that you feel like C-Scale has accomplished, in the effort of decarbonizing the building sector, right? So you're talking about streamlining the workflow for the users. Is there even more exciting achievement you think you've achieved?
Well, the thing that really is top of mind right now, I can tell you why in a moment, is that well, I'll start by backing up. For a long time, uh, we'll say like a cross section of our data models we made available open access
Mhm.
as a web application. It got really widely used. It's referenced by the U.S. General Service Administration as a preferred decarbonization planning tool, used by practitioners and students and in real estate and architecture, et cetera, across North America. But really, that tool as a web-based application was outside of design workflows. And the big accomplishment for us in the last 6 months has been our collaboration with Autodesk.
Mm.
Autodesk is the largest AEC architecture, engineering, construction software platform. They make Revit that's used to design buildings in high definition, and then they also make this product called Forma, which is a planning tool for buildings, cities, and everything in between. Um, our data model, C.Scale, is embedded natively within Autodesk Forma. And that's been really amazing because it's meant that we've gone from, 5,000, a number that we're very proud of, users in a standalone application to being, shipping natively with a software that's used by hundreds of thousands of people to design, projects large and small worldwide. And that collaboration is front of mind now because last week was their big user conference, Autodesk University, and the work that we've done with the Forma team and the sustainability work that they're focusing on generally right now got a shout out on the main stage by the Autodesk CEO to highlight their kind of new found or the redoubling of their focus on sustainability. So that's been a really exciting accomplishment. And because, again, so many people are already in Autodesk, it really,
Mm.
we hope, moves us closer to a reality where every project, everywhere, by every team, expert or not, is doing this analysis, and not just doing it to get a number, but using it to drive decisions on their projects.
Wow, that's super cool. So that's similar to Robert, our mutual friend at Google mentioned that you really want to have this large impact globally. And I do see this is one of them. That's really, really amazing. Great work. And I think then to pivot a little bit. So think about this. You have a really amazing tool and it has a potential large impact. So what about anything still on your wish list? Like one thing that if you can magically make it happen, what is the one thing that can actually make your job even better?
That's a great question. This has come up actually twice in the last 2 weeks. One of our counterparts at Autodesk had asked, like, if you could wave a magic wand, what would it be? And I think the place I really always end up is like, what can we do? How can the work that we do and the role of practitioners help to strengthen or reinforce the regulatory
Mm.
environment? I think the role, like, because that really does sometimes represent like not every bound, but one or two of the bounds of the operating space. And
Mm.
it can raise the floor, it can cut out a set of strategies that might otherwise be maladaptive or help focus attention elsewhere. One thing maybe that I have in my notes here is there's a lot of attention right now, for instance, on requirements to furnish EPDs for the building, environmental product declarations that describe the life cycle assessment of the upstream supply chain emissions.
Right.
This is absolutely essential and important. But one thing policy mechanisms can do is also help us set building level carbon targets
Yeah.
that help us understand, not just that you're using right products with lower emissions, because you can actually use lower emissions products to make a higher emissions building. You can imagine you're just using more of them, right? Like there's not necessarily. So by having building level targets, we create mechanisms where we can also support and create space for designers to pursue dematerialization as a strategy, circularity and reuse, because those are things that might not be necessarily the procurement of one lower carbon product, but can lower overall building emissions. So Toronto right now, actually in Canada, has really exciting carbon caps for buildings. If I could wave a magic wand, that policy would succeed and yield thousands of amazing case studies that it's possible and desirable to have building level carbon caps so that we could see that ratcheting down worldwide as the, my preferred or one of many maybe policy levers I'd love to see developed to decarbonize the built environment.
Great, great. I really resonate with this, and I was actually, as you described this, I was thinking about bringing up the Toronto example, and also at UBC here we have a large group with civil engineering and some of my colleagues in my department. We do have a project with the government. We try to speed up the building code, adaptation, and one component of it is we propose, what if we have a carbon building code in addition to the energy building code? And we're working towards that as well. So it seems like there will be a natural collaboration. I'm glad to discover, and we can talk about this offline. That's great. Yeah. All right. We are almost about time. So as usual, usually I want to end this conversation with a few advices for our next generation young students. For example, if they want to join the field as a sustainability practitioner, especially in decarbonization of buildings, do you have some advice for them? And another kind of category is if they want to start their own company, like what do? You get inspired as a model for them. What other advice for them as well? Kind of two different aspects. Yeah.
I mean, actually, like I appreciate this sort of like that forking question. I think maybe we can bring some of that stuff together. It's something that I really have, I think, stumbled into myself, but it has really, I think, been enabled me. Is that like and this is also the advice I often give, is that there's often, we'll say, people see in front of them two career paths. There's I'm a technician, I'm an implementer, I'm there writing the scripts, building the data models, or, I'm a communicator, I'm an ideas person, like I manage the programs. And really you see, I've seen, I think there's a lot of success. And even if you're focused on one, having skills and fluency in the other. As this space continues to evolve, you will see, I think, a lot of shifting both in the way the technical kind of undergirding of all of this is structured and in the way that the programs and regulations and conversation are changing. And to the extent that over-indexing just on one could, for better or worse, maybe, we tell everybody to learn Python, everybody learns Python, and then in 3 years, everybody's using Rust, like jokes on us, or we say like, you really need to learn this very specific like policy instrument because we think it's going to be and then that changes too. But really having broad exposure and complementary skill sets within the world of ideas, programs, implementations, like that sort of like softer skills and having hard skills, both because I think it's a broader exposure to the base and because on any individual team, whether you're leading it or working on it, nobody likes working working with the tech person who doesn't understand the question, or the person who understands the question but can't communicate it in terms that are relevant to the person who has to go and build it, right? So just like we need to build cross-functional teams, it's often said in tech, we need cross-functional people. Correct. They can understand the big question, understand how to implement, and over the course of one's career, both of those will change a half dozen times, but having exposure and skills in both, I think, is really paramount.
That's great. And I really appreciate that. You actually, basically, I think like in many times, if we're probably engineer or science degree, right? So we're too focused on the technical part, and we didn't really get an opportunity to learn communication, right? But that's very important. That should be a unique package of your own qualification. And I'm glad to hear that because that's what I'm trying to emphasize in my course as well. So it seems like I'm on the right track.
Thank you. I know you're good at that. So
thank you very much, Jack. And it's a really great pleasure to reconnect with you. And thank you for sharing your experience and advice. And best luck with C.Scale. And I definitely want to follow up, and we can, make amazing things together. Thank you again.
That sounds great. Thank you for having me. Talk soon.